So today's thought of the day is this: one should lead a simple and pious life, absorbed in constant divine consciousness, discharging properly at the same time all his worldly responsibilities and duties. The practical pursuit from Silence Speaks. Realization is a practical pursuit for which direct perception through practical experience is essential. The rigid rules of life, generally put forth as essentials for the pursuit, are hardly practicable in the normal life of man. What the world needs today is an efficient method based on scientific lines and running in close collaboration with our normal living. Our great master, with due regard to all these difficulties and keeping in view our physical and mental disabilities and shorter span of life, has, by his kind grace, offered us this easiest way, which ensures greatest success in the least possible time without unnecessary toil or exertion. Under Sahajmarg, the master, by the application of his inner powers, awakens to action and accelerates the dormant forces in the Abhyasi and diverts the flow of divine current towards his heart through the process of pranahati. As a result, the Abhyasi begins to advance spiritually, experiencing more and more of bliss. The Abhyasi has only to prepare himself to receive it, or in other words, to make himself capable and deserving of it. In this way of persistent labor and hardship can now be achieved very easily in a much shorter time with and cannot in any way be put in words. Only practical experience can reveal its merits. A great wonder of the system is that a teacher trained in the system, though he may not himself be actually up to a certain stage, can yet make Abhyasis have a taste of that stage through transmission. The reason is that it is not really the teacher himself who is imparting anything to the Abhyasi through transmission, but the great master himself who does everything through the medium of the teacher's person. Thus, the personal limitations of a teacher do not have any effect upon the Abhyasi, and what he apparently seems to be transmitting comes direct from the unlimited. The teacher must, however, have his will sufficiently developed to effect the course of the flow towards the Abhyas. Any comments, question? He's clarified quite a few things on the transmission and the role of the trainer. We'll go ahead. The next important thing to be kept in mind is the moral discipline, which everyone must be very particular about. He must never do a thing which might bring a bad name to himself or to the sanstha he belongs to. His way of living and dealing with others should be simple, unassuming, and cordial, inspired with a feeling of love and sympathy for others. This will be a source of satisfaction and peace to him as well. One should lead a simple and pious life, absorbed in constant divine consciousness, discharging properly at the same time all his worldly responsibilities and duties. There is not the least justification for anyone to flee away from home in utter disregard of his worldly duties and wander about without any definite aim or purpose. As a matter of fact, even in that state of so called vairagya, one is seldom free from feelings of worldliness. If a grihastha who has ignored God can be presumed to be deceiving God, the so called vairagi will prove a worse sinner. Saint Kabir has aptly remarked God remains 20 paces off from a brahmachari and 30 paces off from a sannyasi, whereas he resides within a grihastha who entertains him in his heart. We should really try to be with God and in God all the time and never be away from Him, even for a moment. When we come up to this state, we are all the time in a state of vairagya. Thus, attachment with God results in detachment from the world, and that is true vairagya. Some persons seem to be under the impression that practices prescribed eh, under his system are by themselves sufficient. That is not exactly so. While referring to sadhana under Sahaj Marg, I must draw attention to the real spirit of it. The Abhyasi must not fix his mind only on. Unfortunately, people keep their eyes only on formal rules and methods and ignore the real spirit. Under the system, though the spiritual training is imparted through transmission, still the most important and indispensable thing remains for the Abhyasi to develop in himself. It is love and devotion to supplement the Abhyas. This feature was introduced into Raj Yoga by Lord Krishna in order to speed up the progress of Abhyasis. The only way to develop love is constant remembrance. While doing your daily work, you must think that you are doing it in obedience to God's orders and hence as part of your duty. This simple process, if followed in the right spirit, will keep you in touch with the ultimate. Another advantage would be will stop further formation of samskaras, the constant remembrance into bhakti. This is because the heat contained in the thought stimulates emotion which assumes the form of bhakti. If you turn it into a habit, you will find how fast love develops in you. It is, in fact, an essential feature of spiritual life. Take a pause here. Anyone wants to add anything? So, few things he mentions is not sadhana should not be mechanical. It should be done in the real spirit. And then he talks about the constant remembrance and also um, uh, love and devotion. So developing love and devotion to supplement the abhyas. So that's a basis duty. We go ahead. In certain sanstha's, the process followed for practice is often kept confidential. It is released or revealed only to those who undertake to join them formally. What their purpose at the bottom may be is not quite understandable. Nature has no secrets, and I think one professing to follow the divine path must have none either. The practice followed in our mission is meditation on the heart. The same method has been recommended by Patanjali. The basic principle of this process has been discussed in my Efficacy of Raj Yoga, which I do not mean to repeat here. The process helps us immensely in throwing off the grossness of being and in assuming the state of greatest subtleness. God is completely devoid of grossness. So, realization of God must also mean the attainment of a similar state of subtleness and purity. This is the greatest merit of the system. It helps the Abhyasi to free himself from grossness settled in the form of coverings. Master's help through the process of pranavati is of utmost importance in this respect. For this reason, it is essential for the Abhyasi to keep away from methods and practices which, instead of eliminating grossness from his being, tend to increase it all the more. We must never keep ourselves rigidly fixed upon wrong traditional ways which do not seem to promise the desired results. Rather, we should adopt only those which may be helpful to us in our march towards subtleness. A man can be a real man only when his eye is diverted towards his inner self. Therein lies the real quest for reality. One who adheres to it establishes his footing in the sphere from which everything descended by itself. In other words, he connects his link to the main source. The only thing which remains then is its expansion, for which the prescribed abhyas is sufficient. I prescribe the easiest means, still some people do not pay much heed to it. The reason may perhaps be that they have no real craving. When craving is created, may God will it so, the attainment of the goal becomes a question of no time. I regret to say that most of our fellow associates remain too much occupied with their own self, attaching to it the greatest importance. Innumerable lives have gone by, but our return to the homeland could not be effected yet. And even now, the craving for that does not seem to have revived in the heart. In fact, all this depends upon the sweet will of God. May they have of me even as much as I may be capable of imparting, and beyond that, if their longing still persists. I will most gladly advise them to seek for another, better accomplished one. The greatest joy to me would be to see people going higher than myself. What or where I am, the master alone is in the full know of. Only so much am I able to understand that I am incapable of determining the limit of my approach, not knowing how much more I have to swim on yet. However, if any of my associates at any later time comes to a full understanding of it, he may have to repent for not availing of it fully at the time. I wonder why their hearts are not moved, even though I remind them of it so often. Perhaps it is due to some of my own shortcomings. We'll take a pause. Anyone wants to add or ask? We'll continue. Our method is so simple that for this very reason, it sometimes becomes very difficult for people to realize its true significance. Difficulties arise when people do not take God just as He is, but fit Him into numerous artificialities created in their own minds to suit their own taste and likings, and thus put Him completely within the sheath of Maya. They worship Him as such, with the result that they themselves get engrossed in Maya, or in other words, they become the worshippers of Maya in gross form. Now, if anyone comes up to explain it to them, they run away from him, thinking that he is trying to delude them. They appreciate more the Mahatmas who, being themselves dyed in various hues of Maya, offer them some colorful things which are suited to their taste. The common mistake is that they do not care to pay attention to those most vital facts, and they seek for liberation from those who have it not. Really, most of them do not have any aspiration for liberation at all. They adhere to gods and goddesses only to serve their worldly ends. There may, however, be a few who worship God as well, but by the way only, and that too for merely selfish purposes. They are in fact not even worthy of having this type of spiritual training, nor are they capable of it. As a matter of fact, while we are marching towards unity, they, on the other hand, are drifting continually towards diversity and are directing the flow of thought into numerous different channels. Thus, our power of thought being diversely applied gets awakened and shattered, and our efforts for realization end in failure. Usually, I do not take such persons into our satsang because I feel convinced that all labor upon them will be fruitless. Consequently, instead of wasting my time on them, I must utilize it for the spiritual benefit of others who crave for it. Under this system, there is absolutely no room for anything except true worship of God, the one absolute. It is not at all possible to proceed with it with gods and goddesses besides. If there be anyone who finds himself too weak to give up, I cannot compel him to do so. But in that case, I cannot be held responsible for his progress. If they are not prepared to give up what is not needed, why should they at all go to others to seek for other means? Their very hankering after other means and methods goes to show that they have no firm faith in what they follow, that at the bottom of the heart they realize some error or deficiency. The only course open to them is to pray earnestly for some time for His grace to guide them onto the right path. For the practical aspect of sadhana, it is essential to take up the practical course of spiritual training, which we need proper guidance. Guidance sought from books is not of much avail since it is often misleading and sometimes dangerous too. Methods prescribed in books are generally confusing, touching the outer aspects only. One can never become a physician in true sense by merely reading the names of medicines and their properties in books. Similarly, by acquiring an outer physical knowledge about God, soul, etc., of the various spiritual states on the path, one can never claim to have realized the object in true sense. It is impossible to come to a thorough understanding of the taste of a mango by merely reading in books the description of it. That the proof of the pudding lies in the eating of it is a well known saying. The teachers of today, too, who profess to guide people on the path, induce people to similar means, giving out false assurances of progress, and people on their part never bother about having an understanding whether the methods they are advised to adopt relate to their physical, mental, or spiritual growth, or to none at all. In most cases, even when they are presumed to have made an advance, they are actually found to be more entangled in philosophic controversies relating to Jiva, Maya, or Brahman, soul, nature, and God. They are usually only topics of conversation for people when they go to a Mahatma for darshan, perhaps without having any serious object or purpose. Now, the question arises whether the solution of such problems, if at all secured, is in any way helpful to that spiritual purpose. I think the answer must definitely be in the negative. Of what value can it be then to them? It is mere mental jugglery, tarka, and nothing else. Take a pause here. So he laments about the people not having the craving and also about the worship, which is more of a Maya and people worshipping the externalities and also the practicality, just not about the reading of the books and the logic. Anything to add? We'll go ahead. Most people are groping in darkness. They consider stones could represent or stand for God. They have lost their sense of discrimination. They cannot distinguish between man and man, nor between man and other beings. Who is a man? Only he who is imbued with a sense of humanity. But the real man, in the proper sense, can be he who makes a man the man that he ought to be, a thorough man in the real sense. How can one judge him? He can neither be a magician nor a conjurer who can demonstrate things unusual and uncommon. But there may be many such conjurers among bhaktas who pretend themselves to be what they are not in the least. They go on crowing Ram, Ram on every bead of their rosary with a heart wandering quite away from it. The majority of people you will find singing songs of devotion, shouting Jai Jai, worshipping pictures and images ceremoniously is a hobby for them. To them, stories and illustrations are the means of bhakti. Recitation of sacred books is worship, and discussions and discourses the attainment of jnana. Teachers and preachers too are not wanting. Go to anybody and he will tell you something or the other to follow. Their hue and cry is so great that the whole firmament is resounding with the noise. But The wonder of wonders is that even then it never is reflected in their hearts, and in spite of all the clamor, they remain where they have ever been, neither gaining what they have to gain, nor even losing what they have to lose. In demonstration of their worship, they have cried, chanted, flattered, and wept, but all to no purpose at all. Yet they think themselves to be bhaktas and are admired as great souls. Thus, in a way, they get their due remuneration for all their acting. They acquire a position and are considered to be leaders or gurus among their circle of bhaktas. This is all that their flattery brings forth for them. It may not, however, be unfair to say that most of the ways of worship commonly followed by the masses are but forms of flattery in one way or the other. They are completely devoid of attachment, love, or surrender. Obviously, all that they do is aimed more at pleasing themselves rather than at pleasing the gods they worship. And this being closely associated with the senses is, of course, a base desire. In other words, they remain all through entangled within their senses, and this they presume to be Ananda, an absurd idea on the very face of it. For this reason, in spite of all their toilsome acting, they remain forever deprived of the bountiful grace of the divine. He has been very critical of the other forms of worship and what is going on in the society. Anything to add? My only object in relating to you all this is to impress upon your mind that such outer demonstrations of flattery do not count the least in awakening the inner consciousness in the heart. It is all for worldly desires related with the senses, which have really no end. Because if one sense desire is fulfilled, then another associated with it crops up at once in its place. These practices do not therefore offer us means of deliverance from the network of wishes and desires, and consequently, no practical purpose can be served thereby. True bhakti is devoid of any physical desire related to the senses. It is actuated by the real craving, a craving which, when fulfilled, does not give rise to another in its place but puts an end to all cravings. It is, in the true sense, the reminiscence of the homeland, which is the final end of our journey. As a rule, the reminiscence of the home will keep the remembrance of God alive in our heart, and vice versa. It is, in fact, an end which is endless, and the craving for it is beyond the range of materiality, not to speak of senses. It is what is commonly understood as realization, oneness, destination, or the end. Attachment to it may otherwise be interpreted as constant remembrance, and that is what bhakti means in the true sense. If it is not there, it is but a mockery and can be termed only as flattery. Flattery is harmful both to the flatterer and to the flattered. A king having all flatterers about him around him is sure to come to harm on that account. He must therefore apply stringent methods to stop this evil. Nature, too, may have possibly adopted a course of action for the purpose. The result shall, however, come to light by itself in due course. So that completes this article.
So he's defining bhakti here, one definition. Attachment to it may otherwise be interpreted as constant remembrance, and that is what bhakti means in the true sense.
It's devoid of any physical desire or related to the senses.
As a rule, the reminiscence of the home will keep the remembrance of God alive in our heart, and vice versa. Okay, we'll meet next Sunday then.